From the truckload quoting page within TieTMS, you can create a new shipment to instantly display your historical lane average alongside all of the market-leading rating intelligence tools. In just a few clicks, you can adjust the quote, add your margin, select your quote response template, and email an official quote right off to the customer from the same page. Request a demo today at tie-software.com to find out how TieTMS can optimize your quoting process.
I got friends only wanna talk business. I got expensive, cause winning's expensive. I got expensive, cause winning's expensive. I've been reading all the war, and I've been shutting down the stars.
Hey, sorry about those technical difficulties. I'm in the middle of a thunderstorm and my Wi-Fi went out on me. But this is Put That Coffee Down. It is the freight show for closers. My name is Kevin Hill, and I am your host through all of this. So, so we're going to talk to Omar Singh. He's the president and founder of Surge Transportation. Today, we're going to talk about why shippers limit. They kind of like to limit the number of transportation providers that they work with. There's probably some efficiencies in there, but sometimes it just doesn't make sense. So we'll talk about that with Omar. He just published an article, I believe yesterday on freightwaves.com about that. But yeah, in the middle of some thunderstorms this morning and having some technical difficulties myself. But with that, let's talk about FreightTech in 2023, kind of what we can expect going forward. And so if we throw up the chart here showing there we go, our survey. Joe Antoshak just actually published an article yesterday as well on freightwaves.com showing a survey that we did. And what you see here is freight tech companies. It's a cool little diagram once you get used to it. But what we have here is kind of here on the left, the top left, the blue purple, autonomous and self-driving, alternative fuel propulsions, and this is all different industries within freight tech and kind of the sentiment in the market about how well they will do in 2023. That comes to new sales, growth, VC funding, and they rank the least. Coming up here to about a 3 ranking, which is about neutral or average. You have carrier verification, vetting, onboarding systems. So they're ranking a 3 on terms of growth and the appetite for the market. For 2023, as we're kind of mired here in a freight recession. Funding for VCs across the board, whether it's freight tech, supply chain, fintech, or any other type of tech, has taken quite a beating over the third quarter and probably to the fourth quarter here in 2022. Probably be about the same for 2023. So this is a scale of 1 to 5. On the 4 scale, we have digital freight matching and also freight factoring payments. That technology kind of interacts with fintech right there. And on 5 is sustainability and visibility. We hear a lot about both of those topics. They're still strong. Interesting enough, if you go in and look at the article, you'll find that visibility is also one of the most crowded spots, and no surprise, there's a lot of companies out there doing the visibility play because it is a very important item in freight tech and moving loads, knowing where those loads are, kind of the conditions of those loads as well. It's a very important part of that, but there are a lot of players out there participating, competing in that visibility. So if you go to freightwaves.com, Joe Antoshak, you can find that article and the full results of the survey. So it's very interesting. It kind of sets us up, teases up for 2023 and the freight environment we will find ourselves in on that. So with that said, let's get to our interview. Let's talk to Omar. I always love talking to Omar. I'm sure he's sharply dressed as usual. So if we go in here and do that, we bring Omar onto the show, we will we'll have a great conversation about transportation providers, shippers, and the selection process on that. How are you doing today, Omar?
Great. Good to see you, Kevin. Thanks for having me on. It's winter time, so I went with the sweater today instead of the sports coat, but here we are.
Yeah. Are you expecting any of the storms that are moving through? There's a lot of snow here on the plains now. You have a lot of rain. We had tornado warnings this morning, and it's supposed to roll through the southeast and I guess up to the northeast where it turns to snow again.
Yeah, I don't think that I've seen a lot of precipitation coming our way. It's a little bit colder. I'm kind of DC Metro, and our Chicago and Jacksonville offices they're both about equally as far from home for me. But I think it's going to be mild this weekend, unless maybe I should check again, So it's cold, though. The temperature drops.
True. Yeah, it is. It's getting cold and getting colder. So, Omar, when we talk about 2023, I just went through some freight tech right there before we get into our actual conversation. What are your thoughts about freight tech going into 2023? Kind of, do you see some challenges for certain verticals, I should say, in the space, or what's kind of your sentiment?
I think there's some of the earlier freight tech companies, call it, say, 5-6 years. A lot of the freight tech really started gaining steam, and I think they took a lot of market share. So probably becoming a much more competitive place for, new entrants who are doing similar things. Like you said, visibility is becoming crowded, payment processing, financial technology is becoming crowded. And I think a lot of the early players really have taken up a lot of market share. And then when you can't differentiate yourself enough, it actually kind of lends to the conversation today, right? But it just becomes so much harder to gain market share when you have a relatively new technology, but someone kind of maybe beat you to the punch by 3 or 4 years and have a huge head start. But having said that, I always say I like to see people win. I don't like to see people lose, and kind of wish the best for everybody out there trying to make a name. And every tool is a little bit unique, but does many of the same things. And I think price points are also just very competitive. So it's going to be a challenging marketplace. But I think, hopefully there's enough to go around for everybody to keep running successful businesses. So.
Yeah, I think there is. I think there's definitely enough appetite out there for that to happen. I think it's going to be much more difficult in 2023 than it was in, say, the first half of 2022 and certainly 2021 to raise money and to go in and on the sell side, certainly for the customer acquisition, to be able to make those sales, right? Because capacity is not quite as tight. There's not the overarching immediate need for maybe all the tools that are out there right now, but they'll survive. The strong will survive and make it through 2023. But with that said, let's talk about the article you wrote that's on FreightWaves.com. Here, it was published yesterday. And talk about shippers and I guess it'd be the selection process for transportation providers. Certainly, the number limit that a lot of shippers kind of put on themselves. I don't know if that's a self-induced kind of arbitrary limit, or maybe it's part of the time and resources they have. But you have a very interesting take, so I'll let you take the floor.
Yeah, first of all, we love our customers, so I could make those hangers, but so don't want to ever say anything bad. But I, in my experience and in my opinion, I do think a lot of at least large enterprise level shippers who have very diverse and complex supply chain needs arbitrarily tend to limit the number because it's just a number, right? Say, all brokers are the same and I only work with 2, or I only work with 3, or I already work with the biggest, so why would I work with you? But unlike motor carriers, motor carriers are sort of expected to have geographic operating areas where they are. certain types of trailers. Maybe they're a flatbed carrier, maybe they're refrigerated, maybe they're dry, maybe they're specialized or they're expedited, and they sell on what they're really good at, and they are then allowed into a large shippers network for that. Whereas I think the interpretation is that brokerages should be able to do everything, and to a certain extent, they're the same. And I just think that we are not maybe equally as geographically limited as motor carriers, but we do have different strengths and weaknesses. And even I'll admit in my own company, we have strengths and weaknesses. We're better at some things than others. And so I think the conversations should be more about, where is the place in my supply chain where you can provide value that maybe somebody who's in there now isn't as competitive at, maybe isn't as fairly priced or isn't as efficient at. And therefore, does it really matter if I already have 5 brokers in the network or 6 or 8, if you're able to do something well that, maybe they're not, or maybe I just want somebody else who's able to do it well.
Yeah, I think when you look at it and when shippers look at it, you mentioned there that, the asset-based carriers have trucks, right? That have real tangible assets that you can verify in a lot of cases, right? And so they have a specific network, specific geography, trailer type. It's very easy to see where freight brokers, it's freight brokerage by freight brokerage, but it's also freight broker by freight broker. They have their specialties and niches as well, and they have developed relationships with a core set of key carriers that probably have a very lot in common, right? So maybe it's lane-based, geography-based, maybe it's trailer type-based, maybe it's commodity-based, right? But as a freight broker, you're building that up to where you don't have that tangible asset under your control or anything, but you have that relationship. And I think a lot of shippers don't, maybe they don't realize that, or that they have the frame of mind that this freight broker should be a generalist and be able to do a little bit of everything. And maybe that's the sales pitch to come in is really go in with a very targeted list of lanes, et cetera, to go after, then trying to capture a little bit of everything.
Well, yeah, I agree, because it's about sort of distinguishing and differentiating yourself, because that's always, one of the questions is why you rather than the other guy. And you're right, there has to be a reason. Otherwise, it becomes a really hard sell. I mean, I think last I checked, there were 27,000 or 24,000 licensed operating freight brokerages in the U.S. And I mean, all 27,000 can't be doing something different, but I think to really stand out and gain an opportunity for somebody, I think you do have to be able to articulate that, you're really strong at something that would be meaningful to them, while also admitting, but I'm not good at these things. So let's make sure we don't set ourselves up to fail. Yeah.
It's hard to do for any salesperson. And I've been in freight brokerages where, and other sales organizations where it was looked down upon if you admitted that you couldn't do anything, if there's anything that you couldn't do well, right? Because the philosophy is there's always a sell. Well, in freight brokers, though, you can get yourself in a lot of trouble. You can in any part of sales, but you start selling things that you can't deliver upon, and it shows up very quickly on the load board and the performance, and trying to cover a truck you can't cover, and trying to make delivery times you can't make. And what you really do is wasting your own time, because you should really, the reason why you're developing a niche is that you can become more efficient at it. And if you're not doing that, you're being inefficient and killing a lot of time doing things that will never have a return on investment. You're never going to see that your commission's on it, but you keep doing it because you think, I guess this philosophy is you can't say, no, I can't do this, which, in real life, it's a very powerful thing to tell people, no, I can't really do that, but I can do this.
Right. Yeah. You want to think you'll make it work, right? That's just kind of
that
giving
optimism.
it all of your effort. But if you're not good at something, you're not, and maybe you're not experienced. And I guess that's probably what people do. They think, well, I'll learn, I'll teach myself, I'll give it a shot. And I think most shippers who are consistently moving freight, that type of business, don't want somebody who's sort of just trying to figure it out as they go along, to be one of their providers. So.
Yeah. Do you think another reason why shippers limit that is just because you mentioned the 27,000 number, and that's registered brokers, and we could talk all day about how many are actually active and actually moving loads, right? But there's still a lot. Let's just you can always say there's a ton of freight brokerages and freight brokers out there. So I think in a lot of industries, and freight brokers being one, is how do shippers winnow that down? How do they determine who's good at what, right? But besides taking someone's word for it, and it becomes maybe too overwhelming, so they just kind of tamper it down. Do you think there's a little bit of that goes into it? It's just it becomes so complex and so unwieldy that there's just no way to store it for shippers to really evaluate.
Yeah, I guess in all fairness, part of my job functions at Surge is to assist with business development. And so naturally I would want an opportunity if I'm asking for one, but you're right, sort of to what end and what does the number become? Is it 4 brokers? Is it 8? Is it 12? Probably it's not 37, right? But So I get that, and I think I've heard 2 general rules of relationship management in large organizations. I've heard some people with the philosophy you can only effectively manage 50 relationships, and some say up to 100. But you're talking about weekly scorecard calls, monthly scorecard calls, weekly mini bids, quarterly bids, and service levels and points of contact, and just kind of the management of your providers is probably very much at play. So whatever an organization, depending on how many managers they have, which maybe if they got 4 main transportation managers that are under procurement and each of them manage 25, I certainly that's a reality where, it's just not possible to have 300 providers and actually get a quality relationship, with all of them.
And that goes kind of back to I know, right?
Go ahead, sir.
Well, no, I mean, I don't think there is a magic number. I think it goes to, how those are selected, whatever that magic number is, or whatever that number is for the shipper, how they go about evaluating and selecting the freight brokerages, right? So maybe you have your 5 core, right, or five of the large, and then you need help with maybe certain modes or certain lanes, or and then you pick one that specializes in that, and another one that specializes in something else, or maybe it's 3 core and then overflow, right? Like whatever that niche is, instead of thinking of it as having 30 generalists running around looking for loads, right? Because I don't think anyone wants that.
Right. Yeah. So 30 then becomes a really large number if there's nothing to distinguish,
yes,
the value that they're creating in a relationship, in a partnership,
Yeah. And you kind of want, you want those guys out there that, this is my heavy haul guy, or this is my cabbage guy, right? I mean, whatever it may be, right? And that's what you move for them. And that's a really good business model to have. But yeah, if you're trying to just get random lanes, then the selection process just it becomes a little bit unwieldy, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a lot of options, and it's a lot of just, I guess you're right, things that everybody needs to take into consideration and go about selecting the best people given your network, right? Because again, even in the large enterprise level organizations, tend to break up their business units based on, something, whether it's, and brokerages and motor carriers do, but whether it's, trailer type. So you've got dry business unit, refrigerated business unit, you might have outbound business and then inbound business, but sort of all of those managers are figuring out who it is that's best to work with, even given just their responsibilities within that company's supply chain, which aren't all of them. The inbound managers have a very, very narrow focus on, making sure production keeps running. Mm-hmm. And so it's going to be a different set of providers that they're partnering with than the outbound refrigerated guy or lady, so just different needs.
Yeah, you're exactly right. So what's kind of your another one of your the recap or prognosis of the article and kind of your advice for shippers, how to think about selecting freight brokerages and thinking about that number, the number of transportation providers.
Well, yeah, and again, like I said, so take some organizations have multiple managers within the organization. And so is it at the company level? Is it at the manager level? But yeah, I guess if there's one point that I would be primarily driving home in the article or the thought is that I would like to see those decisions being made based on the value strategically that a partnership can bring rather than an arbitrary number to say, I got 5 brokers, I don't need another one. But to say, well, explain to me where, it's going to create additional value to be partners. And if you can do that, then, let's see if there's a path forward.
Yeah, no, and that's exactly, if you're a salesperson out there thinking about this, if you're a freight broker out there, that's a common objection, number one, right? And you hit the nail on the head right there that when you're calling in, you better be thinking about how you create additional value instead of, can I move your loads?
Right. And, but it's a worthy effort to call. And I think that's probably part of the reason also, a lot of shippers get so many solicitations and they probably start out the same way. And it's just, it's challenging sometimes, I think, just to get enough time to make the case for whatever your value proposition is, mm-hmm. Just to get them to listen to it. But I remember I saw an old picture of like a guy with a sword going out to a sword fight, and there was someone trying to sell him a machine gun, and I don't have time for a salesperson. I have to go to this fight. Yeah, but so kind of one of those.
Yeah, I understand. So quickly before we go, Omar, kind of one or two sentences. Kind of what's your prognosis for 2023? What's your key observation?
Well, I think there's a lot of doom and gloom talk for 2023, and I think all of us are just going to have to sort of realize it's going to be a tight market, tighten our belt, control our costs, right, and just do our best to try to continue providing value to shippers, hopefully continue to provide value for motor carrier partners, and keep them busy and profitable. It's very challenging right now. Rates are extremely competitive. But I think that, we're going to have to really all focus on our efficiencies and improving probably the partnerships that we have already. Whereas it's going to be, I think, somewhat difficult to go out and forge a lot of new partnerships in this market. Yeah. So, kind of hold on
probably
tight.
Will.
Yeah.
Yeah, it probably will. Thank you again, Omar, for joining us on Put That Coffee Down. We're going to wrap it up right here. But yeah, have a great 2023 and great Christmas.
All right, great catching up with you, Kevin.
I got friends only want to talk business. I got expensive because winning's expensive. I got expensive because winning's expensive. I've been reading all the war, and I've been shutting down the stars.